This Inside Line is all about my 2001 Chevy S10 Crew Cab. I'm gonna break down why I built it, how it's built, and what in the world I do with this truck. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so quick backstory for those that are wondering what in the world is the deal with this truck. I was looking for one of these in 2017. I had a Tacoma that I was considering straight axling. Ultimately, I knew it was worth too much money and I didn't want to tear it up. So I sold that truck and started my search for a double cab S10, which I learned is very difficult to find. They only made these things for about 4 or 5 years, so the window for looking for a crew cab, pretty small. Plenty of extended cabs and regular cabs out there. I've always liked these trucks. My grandmother actually had a regular cab short bed white one. It was always a neat little truck I kind of grew up with, and I like this generation. So I just wanted one. I thought they'd be cool. They're fairly inexpensive compared to all other crew cab trucks out there, and the 4.3 in my experience has been a fairly reliable engine, so I thought it was a good decision to go down this road. So I ended up finding one and started the whole build process in October of 2018. Now, I want to make sure that I give credit where credit's due. This entire truck was built at Low Range 4x4 here in Wilmington, North Carolina. I'm friends with those guys. I've known them for a very long time, and we've done builds plenty in the past. One specifically that pertains to sort of this is in 2011, after I had rolled my 97 Ford Ranger, I took it to the shop and talked with Kelly Carter, the owner. Kind of said, hey, I wasn't happy with how I built it the first time. I got some ideas to how I'd like to build it the second time, and we worked together and created a really fantastic truck. And I wanted to do something similar with this, but obviously I needed a crew cab because I've got 2 kids and want to make sure that they're able to come with me on any adventure I want to do. So now this truck had about 110,000 miles on it when I picked up, 109, something like that. Stock 4.3 liter V6. It still has that same engine. I've just done things like water pump and starter and alternator and all that good stuff just to kind of refresh some things. Got a new radiator in it. But other than that, I had to make a custom sort of intake for it because I ran out of room up front under the hood, because we had done a sort of a unique thing with my Warren winch where we relocated the power distribution box under the hood, and also needed room for my PSC reservoir. Other than that, the engine is basically all stock, just new tune-up and that sort of deal. And it's really not bad. AC blows cold. It's got pretty good power for what this truck is. It's not great on the highway, and if you're in big mud or super wet conditions where you gotta floor it, you're gonna realize that it's definitely not a V8, but it's not terrible. I think it's fairly adequate for most of what I do with the truck, so that's why the engine is still just the 4.3 liter V6. Now, as crazy as this truck looks, a lot of people are surprised to know that I drive it on the road all the time. My kids really like to ride in it. We take it out to the beach a bunch, and it's pretty easy to drive. It doesn't have sway bars, but it has a lot of valving, and with this spring rate, it really stays nice and stable. I actually just got back from a 1,200 mile round trip where I drove this thing from North Carolina to Windrock, Tennessee, so it did perfectly fine. It will do 70 miles an hour in overdrive. It doesn't hold 70 going in the mountains by any means. It's got a small engine and not a ton of power, but you can still do 60 going up the passes, and that's fine. You can definitely hear the mud grapplers. The faster you go, the more noise they make, but they drive fine. I don't have any weight. These things were never balanced, and I haven't had a single problem with that. My street pressure is around 25 psi, which is a good balance of keeping this thing in power and keeping fairly good ride quality out of the tire. A lot of people ask about the sort of center console here. It's one of my favorite things that Low Range built. So it's got a 4-speed Atlas in it, and you have this stick that's closest to me is the underdrive. So that's a 2.72 to 1 low range. So that's what the factory low range would have been in the stock NP 231C, I believe that transfer case was. So this is the underdrive for 272, and these are your main twin sticks for the main case, and that has a 2 to 1 in it. Now, I did the 2 to 1 thinking that maybe one day I would put a V8 in it. If you don't think you'll ever go that route and you're thinking about doing a 4-speed, do a 3 to 1. It'll give you a little bit more torque, for the trail, and you don't have to use the underdrive as much. When I'm crawling, I've got everything in low, so underdrive is engaged. If I'm just putting around on the beach, or I'm like trying to make some time in Uori, I'll just do the underdrive, or not the underdrive, I'll just do the main case and 2 to 1, and it's fine. Put the truck in first gear, and it's not so slow. If it's really muddy, this is enough for that. But if you're really going to crawl, I've got everything locked in, and the final ratio I think is around 5.44 to 1. I'll put it on the screen just in case I mess that up. But it's really good. I did have the transmission rebuilt. It's a 4L60E. It was built locally by a place called Tri-County Transmission. Haven't had an issue with it. They weren't particularly confident that it was going to last forever, given this truck's on 40s and I was going to drive it everywhere. But this transmission was built in 2018 or 2019, and here we are 2022 and haven't had a problem with it. One of the big things if you're going to straight axle one of these things that you need to know, and that is your drive shaft is going to be fairly short unless you do some sort of divorced TK setup where it's really far and pushed back. You only end up with about a 29-inch long front drive shaft, and that's really tough to get a lot of suspension travel out of. That's why we had to limit this travel of this one. But more importantly, thankfully with an Atlas you can actually clock the transfer case down so you can get a little bit more down travel out of it, which is what I did. And then it's got a custom cross member set up front. It's basically a Sky's off-road design front transmission cross member, and then Low Range built a heavy-duty skid plate for it that ties into a custom built cross member that has a TMR brace on it that keeps this thing nice and rigid and keeps the transfer case in place. And connected to the T case, obviously I had to do aftermarket drive shafts. It's got 1350 JE Reel drive lines in it. The front drive shaft is 1350 CV as well. The rear axle is a junkyard late model 14 bolt. I have no idea what it came out of. I just called my buddy at the pick and pull and said, hey, do you guys 14 bolts that have disc brakes? He said, yep. So I went and picked it up, 250 bucks, put new brakes on it, still stock axle shafts. It's got 538 nitro gears, nitro gear cover as well, ARB air locker. Up front, axle wise, it is a high pinion Dana 60 from an 03 F250. It's running 538 nitro gears, nitro cover. It's got an ARB air locker in it. The axle shafts are chromoly. They're from Nitro Gear. The outers are custom unit bearings that were machined to where I could run a 35 spline outer Warren hub. And they were also modified to where the pattern was re-drilled to 8 on 6.5. So I've got matching 8 on 6.5 front and rear. I just had to drill out the rotors to match that up, and it really wasn't a big deal in terms of that. Obviously, we cut out all of the IFS up front. I didn't trust any of that stuff for what I wanted to do. I actually picked up an LJ long arm kit from Rock Crawler Suspension, and then I picked up JK coilovers from them as well. And the concept here was the weight was very similar to a JK. The arm lengths, I'd done some prelim measurements on where I was going to put the axles, was really going to work out well, so that's what I did. So up front, it's their Rock Crawler 3-link, so it's a single link bar up front that we've got tucked in. The mount at the frame side is a custom one that we sort of modified from a Barnes mount. The one at the axle is actually the Rock Crawler 3-link mount. The axle mounts are from Artec, and we had to modify the housing on the driver's side, actually cut the casting to allow for the suspension brackets. Those are all custom for the coilovers at the bottom, and the links are just how they come. Now the links on the bottom at the frame side are from Barnes 4-wheel drive. So that's the basic bracket configuration there. The coilover towers we built at low range, they're all 1 3/4 120 wall that have been reinforced, and they are swept back, and it sweeps that 12-inch travel coilover in a way that I get 14 inches of vertical wheel travel out of it, which is awesome. I'm running a 225/300 in the front. It's a little stiff, but I like how stable it keeps the truck, so I'm going to keep it for now. It's got about 4.5 inches of up travel. It is limit strapped on the driver's side to preserve that front drive line from overextending. So we did have to do that. Now in terms of a track bar, it's using a Barnes track bar mount at the axle, a custom one at the frame side with a custom built track bar using spherical rod ends. Makes it really easy to adjust and package in there, just kind of a single bend to clear everything that we needed to. The steering links, obviously a good thing to kind of tie in here. So it's a full bar kit from Barnes 4-wheel drive, so their lower tie rod and their drag link. Now that setup mounts to a steering knuckle that's from U-Joint Off-Road, and it's their full knuckle and high steer arm. The gearbox itself is actually from PSC Motorsports, and it's a TJ gearbox with a forward swing pitman arm from a Jeep Wagoneer that we reamed out to use a 1-ton tie rod in. So that's how the basic front end is configured. It does have hydraulic assist. It's a whole kit from PSC Motorsports. It works phenomenal. I can steer these 40s with my pinky, even off-road, so that is a really good thing. The rear is a triangulated 4-link, so using those LJ uppers from Rock Crawler with their truss. At the frame side, it's using Barnes adjustable upper brackets, and it has Barnes brackets for the lowers as well. I really like their brackets because it tucks the arms up really high for the lowers, so you don't have to worry about hitting them as much. So the coilovers are custom tabs at the axle, and the towers are just like the front, except they're just straight up and down, nothing swept to them. Didn't tie it into the bed anymore because I wanted to keep the bed usable, but that's kind of how that configure set up. Just 120 wall, 1 3/4 DOM tubing that's reinforced, and they've been perfectly fine. Again, in the back is using these JK coilovers. It's a 150/225 coil rate, still stock valving, which is probably a little aggressive, but it really makes the truck stable, so I like that. It's got about 5 inches of up travel in the back with the remainder of down. It is not limit strapped. The big thing about this truck, and one of the biggest challenges, is I wanted it to look like an S10. I didn't want it to be so chopped up where the front end was really pushed out and it just kind of looked weird. And so that was probably the hardest part of this whole build, is doing that so we could actually cycle some up travel out of this thing. And the way we kind of managed that was put the truck on the rack, get the axles roughly where we needed them to be, put up these 40-inch Nittos, and have it mounted on the wheel and just start cycling lower the truck. And where it hit, we would trim, and we would just keep doing that until, okay, we can't get any more up travel out of this. This is as much as we could go. And a lot of times people see the truck and they see the big fender well cut out and they think, why did you cut out so much? And it was really necessary to allow this thing to fully cycle. And up front, it is tight. It full turn with it stuffed. You could probably barely put a business card between the pinch seam and the tire, but it works. And we spent a lot of time figuring that part out. Now out back, we had a lot more room to trim things out, which we did. We still had to trim an absolute ton, not only to make it look sort of even with the front, but just to get it where this axle could cycle properly. To give me a little bit more room in the back, we high clearance the rear and just put a simple 1 3/4 120 wall tube bumper in the back. I didn't want anything super flashy. I wanted this truck just to look like a straight axle S10. So that's why it's a very simple basic back bumper with a single tow hook in the back that if I need to use it, I can. Nothing really crazy. That was kind of the point of it. I knew it was going to already look pretty wild being chopped up as much as it was. So I went very mild on what I wanted to do for the bumper, at least in the back. For the front bumper, that was a big challenge. We needed to redo a cross member because we'd cut one out, and so we decided to kind of make a cross member out of this winch tray that I got from Warren. I knew I was going to use their winch, and we got it where you can remove the front center section of tubing on this front bumper to access the winch if I ever have to pull it out, and then we cut a hole in the grill so you can actually put your hand in and engage it and disengage it when you need to. The box, like I mentioned earlier, is actually relocated under the hood, and I've got one of those wireless winch controllers that's inside of the cab, so when I need to use it, it's not that big of a deal. It's all 120 wall tubing, and then I want to say the plate's 1/4 inch steel. We just painted it up, and it's been great. Keeps the front end nice and stiff. So, and I've come down on that thing a couple of times. It does its job just fine. The sliders on the side were from Trail Gear. They were originally for a Tacoma. We had to modify the mounting legs for them to get them out far enough. I really wanted them as flat as I could because I knew I'd be buckling my kids into car seats, and I needed a really large platform for me to be able to stand on that. So that's why if you see them, they're flat. I needed them like that for that. They work great. I've got one on the driver's side just a little bent from me getting a little too wild off-road, but other than that, they've been perfectly fine. We made some diamond plates for them to weld to the chassis, and all that's been good. So that's really the armor in a nutshell. One thing I get a lot of questions about is the fuel cell on it. So obviously going with a triangulated 4-link, I needed to figure out something for the fuel cell or for the fuel tank, so the factory one wouldn't work. So I got a 19-gallon fuel cell from RCI, and then I got some mounts from Artec. We had to modify the mounts from Artec to work, and then I took the actual fuel cell and the original fuel pump over to Area 51 Fabricating, and I said, I need all this to work. And so they made me a mount plate that bolts the factory fuel pump in, so I can use the stock fuel pump, which allowed me to keep the line tube for the evap and have a in-tank pump, which has been great. We made a mount for the spare tire that allowed me to basically just have it flattened with a simple T-handle to keep it secure. The real reason I wanted the tire in the bed, even though it takes up a ton of room, was to balance out the weight a little bit of the truck, because it just does not have a lot of rear end weight in general. So the tire helps with that tremendously, especially with a full tank. It really smooths out and evens the ride. These are KMC, they're 17 by 9. They've been a good wheel. 3.5 inches back spacing is normally not what I love, but I needed something that was going to keep the tire from hitting the control arms and clear other suspension things. So 3.5 inches of back spacing is what I went with here. The tires, I really like the Mud Grappler. I liked how it looked, to be honest with you. I knew it was going to make noise. I've had Mud Grapplers in the past. We always call them noise grapplers. But it's actually a really good tire. If you can get past that roar, or maybe you like it, the big advantage of them is they have lots of sipe, so it actually drives really nice in the rain, which we get plenty here in southeastern North Carolina. And they work phenomenal off-road. I drop these things down to usually about 6 psi in the rear and 7 up front, and it just crawls. I have no issue. So I've chewed up the rings a lot on these beadlocks, and they're still holding and haven't had an issue. Definitely haven't been kind to these sidewalls, and I've never had a problem. Tires are not balanced, anything like that, and it drives perfectly smooth, no hops, no weirdness. And that's really been sort of the story of this truck, is a lot of it's been kind of, all right, let's see if this will work. I think this is going to work. Nothing was like, oh yeah, this is exactly how you build a solid axle S10, but it's all worked great. Kind of got lucky, kind of part experience, and working with the right people to get this truck moving in the right way. Don't really have any big plans for it right now. I just kind of enjoy it and take it out with the kids. I really don't want to tear it to pieces, but I still like wheeling it. got a good wheelbase for wheeling. It's 126 inches, so it's not super long, but it's very stable. And with the width and suspension travel that it has, it just works awesome off-road. Cannot ask for anything better than how we did it. Very, very happy with it. And that's about it. So hopefully everyone's doing well, and this answers all your S10 questions and queries. And yeah, let's get back to working on trucks. So I got some stuff in the garage I got to get to next, and more adventures on the way. All right, take care everybody. Bye-bye.